Hey guys, how's it going? In this video, I want to share some of my favorite philosophers. So this is not necessarily in any particular order. It's just philosophers that have influenced me in my thought. So hope you enjoy, and feel free to comment below. I would like to hear some of your favorite philosophers. Thanks. So the first philosopher I want to go with, and I don't think this comes as a surprise for most of you, but it's Nietzsche, right? So Nietzsche has influenced my thought pretty greatly since I first discovered philosophy. So Nietzsche is one of the greatest thinkers of the 19th century. He is very influential in existentialism, psychology, and when you're reading Nietzsche, there's never really a dull moment. There's a lot of wit and force in his writing. You can really feel his personality come out on the pages. He's quite funny too to read at times. And what I really like about Nietzsche is his onus on overcoming and becoming who you are, right? So in Nietzsche's philosophy, there's this constant drive to overcome conventional dogmas, Christian morality, any type of constraint that would hold you back or regress. So the notion of the Übermensch, which is at the core of Nietzsche's thought, is all about progressing forward, not regressing. So, that's really appealing, and it's exciting, especially reading it for the first time. I've never heard anything like this before. So it could definitely be appealing. And Nietzsche's criticisms on Christianity as well is another big aspect of his philosophy, and they can be quite devastating, especially if you've never heard any objections raised towards Christianity. It can come as a shock. And finally, I would say Nietzsche's knowledge of the ancient Greeks is very impressive, how he contrasts their values with our contemporary values. So it really gives us an insight into the historicity and genealogy of our values. So ultimately with Nietzsche, what you're going to get is this onus upon overcoming, and the way to do that is to affirm your existence, essentially, and look into suffering and the horrors of life with affirmation and not resignation. So that's going to be at the core of Nietzsche's thought, and it's very fascinating. So if you haven't read Nietzsche, I highly recommend it. So coming in at number 2 is going to be Dostoyevsky. So Dostoyevsky, like Nietzsche, is very interested in human psychology, right? So a lot of his novels surround the dark depths of human psychology, with characters like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment and Ivan in Brothers Karamazov. So someone like Dostoyevsky thinks that with the death of God, man dies in a sense as well. That all is permitted. If there is no God, as Dostoyevsky says, then all is permitted. We can really do anything. There's no objective basis or standard for right and wrong. So Dostoyevsky's combination of theology, psychology, and philosophy is really appealing to me. And ultimately he believes that Christianity is the antidote to existential despair. So, when you read Dostoyevsky, you really become convinced that if man were really to become God, and God is dead, what that could entail. And according to Dostoyevsky, it's catastrophe. Now someone like Nietzsche is kind of excited, he's thrilled about the death of God. It's a segue into the Übermensch, but for Dostoyevsky, this is, he fears it very much. It's not something that he thinks is a good thing. So the two of those thinkers are really interesting on the topic of the death of God and human psychology. So if you've never read Dostoyevsky, I recommend you read him. And Nietzsche was very influenced by Dostoyevsky as well. So he's a powerhouse thinker. Highly recommend Brothers Karamazov, Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, and Notes from Underground. Really, all of his works are fantastic and will give you a really rich insight into human psychology. So coming in at number 3 is Soren Kirkengard, the Danish philosopher. What I like about Kierkegaard is his subjective approach towards belief in God. So Kierkegaard does not think you can believe in God through reason, but rather just through faith alone. But crucially, if you believe in God through faith, this, according to Kierkegaard, involves a suspension of reason. So you essentially believe by virtue of the absurd. But through suspending your reason in making room for faith, you, in effect, believe in something higher than reason through the subjective passions of yourself. So Kierkegaard believes that faith is the most important journey that a human can take into fully actualizing the self. And, Kierkegaard's really influential in psychology as well, existential psychology, with his writings on anxiety or angst. So, he's a really interesting philosopher. So coming in at number 4 is Carl Jung. Although Jung is not a philosopher, maybe he's not considered a philosopher, he's still very, influential in philosophy. He still contributed to philosophy. And, I'm really fascinated by his work on dreams, archetypes, individuation, the process of individuation, rather, the collective unconscious. And in general, Jung's focus on psychology and religion is fascinating. Whether or not you follow him to his conclusions is another story. Jung gets a lot of, or rather Jung gets a lot of criticism for pseudoscience. They call his psychology pseudoscience. But even if it is, he's still absolutely fascinating, and I highly recommend checking out some of his work. Most notably the Red Book and Man and His Symbols, 2 really fascinating books. I haven't read the entirety of the Red Book, but it's quite deep. I mean, you can really lose yourself pretty quick, so be careful. So coming in at number 5 is Alvin Planiga. He's a contemporary philosopher of religion. He's a Christian philosopher who primarily focuses epistemology, epistemic justification. And where he comes onto the scene, well, let me explain first that at the start of the 1920s, there was a philosophical movement referred to as logical positivism, which they basically said that metaphysics or questions about God's existence, good and evil, the purpose and meaning of life is really absurd because they can't be scientifically verified. So the positivists just basically said, let's do away with that stuff. But then, Plantinga comes on the scene, and, he essentially shows that they may be wrong, right? That we can make sophisticated arguments about God's existence and metaphysics and the meaning of life that have explanatory power. And he does this, or rather shows this, through books like God, Freedom, and Evil, God and Other Minds, Knowledge and Christian Belief. So Planiga deserves a lot of credit in the resurgence of Christian philosophy and philosophy of religion in general. And I highly recommend you check him out. He's, really, his books are not too difficult to read, although I think Warrant and Christian Belief, I haven't read that, I've read the condensed version. Knowledge and Christian Belief, it's a smaller book and more accessible, but all of philosophy can really be difficult to read. It just depends on how long you've been reading for and whatnot. But anyway, check out Planiga, and he's all over YouTube, so you can find him on YouTube. So coming in at number 6, I kind of want to do David Bentley Hart and Ed Fazer. I kind of want to put them on the same level because they're equally both great to me. Really, what got me into Fazer and Hart is their attacks on new atheism. Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett. Hart wrote Atheist Delusions, and Fazer wrote The Last Superstition, a refutation of the new atheism. And they're both really fantastic books. It's difficult if you read them to go back to the new atheists and actually take them seriously after reading a book, books like that. They're really impressive. Aside from their criticisms on new atheism, they're just two incredible contemporary philosophers that have a lot of interesting things to say, not only on philosophy and religion, but many other areas. David Bentley Hart writes about politics and whatnot, and baseball. He has a really diverse category there. So, and they're both great philosophers, and I would recommend checking them out. Just a few honorable mentions. I do like Thomas Nagel. He's a contemporary atheist philosopher. I like his work on philosophy of mind. I like Schopenhauer. Who else? Yeah, Schopenhauer. Kant's cool. I just haven't read a lot of their work, but they, really any philosopher, anybody who actually, is wondering about the world and existence and wants to, just offer good conversations is fascinating to me. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and take care, guys. Thanks.